welcome to the deep dive. So it looks like we're taking a deep dive into the science of fat loss today, huh? And our listener sent over some really cool stuff like an actual scientific overview document, along with a podcast episode.
Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
But I think we can pull out the most important stuff, the stuff that people actually want to know.
Absolutely. And, I think what's really interesting about these sources is that they don't just focus on the what to do for fat loss, the diet and exercise stuff. They really get into the why.
Right. Like the mechanisms behind it all.
Exactly.
And the document starts off by kind of separating the hard science from the soft science of fat loss.
Oh, yeah, that's a great distinction.
Yeah, and I never really thought about it like that before,
Yeah.
So on one hand, you've got like the calories, the hormones, the metabolism. But then on the other hand, you've got this whole other side that's all about like psychology and habits and mindset.
Which is huge. I think so often we get caught up in the numbers, the calories, the macros, but if you're not addressing the psychological side, it can be a recipe for disaster.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have the perfect diet and exercise plan,
Right.
But if you're stressed out all the time or not sleeping well, your hormones are going to be all over the place, and it's going to sabotage your efforts.
100%. Sustainable fat loss, it has to take into account both sides of the equation. It's not just about the physical, it's about the mental and emotional too.
For sure. It's like a holistic approach.
Exactly.
So the document, it lays out this first law of healthy fat loss. And
Okay.
surprise, surprise, it basically boils down to calories in versus calories out.
No way. Really?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah. But they actually mentioned this study where a professor lost weight by eating nothing but Twinkies and Doritos. Like, can you believe that?
Oh, Professor Hobb. Yeah, the convenience store diet. I remember that study. It's pretty controversial, but it definitely proved a point. Even with junk food, if you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight.
Yeah. But I think it's important to note that just because you can lose weight eating junk food doesn't mean you should.
Totally. I'm sure Professor Hobb felt like crap during that experiment.
Probably.
And, in the long run, you want to be healthy, right?
Right. It's not just about the number on the scale.
Exactly. It's about feeling good, having energy, and being healthy overall.
Yeah, and I think that's where the whole food quality thing comes in.
100%.
Like, yeah, you can lose weight eating Twinkies and Doritos, but are you really nourishing your body? Probably not.
Nope, not at all. You're depriving yourself of essential nutrients, vitamins, minerals,
And fiber.
antioxidants, all the things your body needs to function properly.
Yeah. So we've established that calories matter a lot.
Big time.
But the document also brings up this concept of metabolic adaptation,
Yeah.
which I don't know if everyone's familiar with that. So could you maybe just explain that a little bit?
So basically it means that when you cut calories, your body kind of tries to fight back. It's like, hey, whoa, I'm used to getting this much energy. What are you doing to me?
Like your body's freaking out a little bit.
Yeah, it's trying to conserve energy. It wants to hold on to those precious calories. So it slows down your metabolism to try and compensate.
Interesting. So how do we prevent that from happening? Like, how do we outsmart our own bodies?
That is the million-dollar question. Well, two key things are resistance training and protein.
Okay.
When you're in a calorie deficit, your body starts looking for energy sources, right? And if you're not actively trying to preserve muscle mass, it might start breaking down muscle tissue for fuel, which is not what we want.
No, we want to hold on to that muscle.
Exactly. So resistance training tells your body, hey, these muscles are important. We need them. Don't even think about breaking them down.
It's like sending a signal.
Exactly. And then protein provides the building blocks for muscle repair and growth. So you're giving your body what it needs to maintain that muscle mass even when you're eating less.
So lifting weights and making sure you're getting enough protein are key. Got it. But let's say you're doing all that right. You're tracking your calories, hitting the weights, fueling up with protein. How do you actually know if you're losing fat? Like, how do you track your progress?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because the document, it goes into a bunch of different methods for measuring body fat. And honestly, it's a bit overwhelming.
It can be, yeah. It's like, where do you even begin? You've got your simple methods like skin fold calipers, which are relatively inexpensive but can be, user dependent. Like, how skilled is the person taking the measurements?
Right.
And then you've got bioelectrical impedance analysis, or BIA, which is pretty quick and easy. You just stand on a scale, basically. but it can be influenced by things like hydration levels, so it's not always the most accurate. And then, of course, you've got the more high-tech options, like DEXA scans, which are considered the gold standard. They give you a really detailed breakdown of your body composition, but they can be pricey and not everyone has access to them.
Yeah. So there's a trade-off there between convenience, cost, and accuracy. What would you say is the most practical approach for someone who's serious about tracking their progress, but maybe doesn't want to break the bank or go through a super complicated process?
I mean, honestly, it depends on the individual. What are their goals? What resources do they have available?
Right.
For some people, just tracking their weight and how their clothes fit might be enough. Others might want something more objective. If you're just looking for a general idea of your body composition, skin fold calipers or BIA might be sufficient.
Yeah.
But if you want a really in-depth analysis, then yeah, a DEXA scan is probably the way to go.
Yeah. It seems like for most people, a combination of methods is probably the best approach.
I'd agree with that.
Like maybe track your weight, take some circumference measurements, and see how your clothes fit. And then if you really want to get super specific, you can consider something like a DEXA scan.
Exactly. And I think the key is to find something that you can stick with consistently, because ultimately that's what matters most. It doesn't matter how accurate your measurements are if you're only doing them once in a blue moon.
Right. Consistency is key.
Okay.
That's a good takeaway. But even with all this talk about measurements, it's important to remember that the scale doesn't tell the whole story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like both the document and the podcast emphasize that fat loss goes beyond the simple calories in, calories out mantra. They point to factors like hormones, sleep, stress, and even our mindset as playing significant roles.
Absolutely. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the bigger picture. You know, the podcast even talks about this study from Stanford where they found that people who believed that exercise was beneficial actually lost more weight. Like, literally, they had two groups of people doing the same exercise routine, but they told one group that it was a really effective workout, and they told the other group that it was just, a moderate workout. And the group that believed it was a more effective workout actually lost more weight.
Whoa, that's wild. So it's like our beliefs about what we're doing can actually influence the outcome.
Right. Like the mind-body connection is so powerful.
Yeah, it's almost like tricking your body into believing something is helping. And then it actually does.
Totally. And I think that's why it's so important to focus on finding activities that you enjoy, because if you're dreading your workouts, it's going to be harder to stick with them and see results,
Absolutely. But one thing that really surprised me in the podcast was the discussion about the nervous system's role in fat loss. They talk about how specific neurons can actually trigger fat release from fat cells.
Oh yeah, that was a fascinating part.
I don't know if I've ever heard of that before.
Yeah, it's a relatively new area of research, and it's pretty cool. It's like your nervous system is constantly talking to different parts of your body, including your fat cells.
Okay.
And these cells have receptors that receive signals from neurons, and those signals can influence whether fat is stored or released. What's even more fascinating is that certain types of movements and even things like temperature can stimulate these neurons.
Really? So we can actually target fat loss in specific areas?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? The research is still ongoing,
Okay.
but it's definitely a possibility.
Hold on, are we talking about fidgeting? Because I remember the podcast mentioning a study about NEAT, like a non-exercise activity thermogenesis,
Yes.
and how fidgeters can burn tons more calories just by moving around more throughout the day. What is that all about?
Right. NEAT is all the calories you burn outside of structured exercise. So like walking, cleaning, even fidgeting. It might not seem like much, but those little movements can really add up. There was research showing that people who fidget a lot can burn anywhere from 800 to 2,500 more calories per day compared to people who are more sedentary.
Wow. That's a pretty big difference. So I guess all those little movements really do matter.
They do. Every little bit counts.
But before we all start fidgeting our way to slimness, let's talk about another trend that's gaining popularity: cold exposure.
Oh, yeah, the ice baths. Everybody's jumping in the ice bath these days.
Right. So the podcast actually talks about the different types of fat, like white fat, brown fat, and beige fat.
Yes.
And how cold exposure can actually activate brown fat, which then burns energy to generate heat.
It's true. Brown fat is like your body's internal furnace.
So embracing the cold could actually help us burn more calories.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It seems that brief, intense cold, like cold showers or quick plunges, are more effective than just feeling chilly. The key is to actually shiver because shivering triggers the release of something called succinate, which helps brown fat burn energy.
Okay, so shivering's a good sign. But how do we incorporate cold exposure safely and effectively? And is it really a game changer for fat loss, or is it just another, hype? I think we need to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to unpack there.
But first, let's switch gears and talk about another essential aspect of fat loss: exercise. So the podcast breaks down various types of exercise, including HIIT, SIT, and MICT. And it seems like they're really emphasizing the intensity rather than the duration when it comes to shedding fat.
That's right. Intensity is key.
Okay, so we're talking short bursts of intense effort versus hours on the treadmill.
Exactly. Think quality over quantity.
Okay, I'm all ears. But before we get into the specifics of different workout styles, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back to delve deeper into the world of exercise and its impact on fat loss. Okay, so we're back and ready to really dig into this whole exercise thing. You mentioned before the break that the podcast talks about HIT, SIT, and MICT.
Yep, those are some of the big ones.
Yeah. Most people listening probably already know what those are. But maybe we could just give a super quick refresher.
For sure. So we've got high-intensity interval training, or HIIT. Then there's sprint interval training, which is SIT. And then, of course, good old moderate-intensity continuous training, which is MICT.
Right. And they all kind of have their own benefits and drawbacks, right?
Yeah, totally. It really depends on your goals and fitness level and all that.
Right. Okay, so HIIT, that's short bursts of really intense effort.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You're going all out for a short period of time, followed by a short recovery period. Think sprinting for 30 seconds and then resting for a minute and then repeating that cycle a few times.
Okay. So that's a HIIT. What about SIT? How is that different from HIIT?
SIT is even more intense than HIIT. It involves even shorter, even more explosive bursts of effort. You're talking all-out sprints for maybe 8 to 30 seconds, followed by longer recovery periods, so it's really demanding.
Okay, that sounds pretty intense. I don't know if I can handle that.
It's definitely not for everyone, but it can be really effective for improving speed and power.
Okay, so if you're really serious about your athletic performance, maybe that's something to look into.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm more of a moderate intensity kind of person. What about MICT? What does that involve?
MICT is basically your more traditional cardio. So think jogging, swimming, cycling, that kind of stuff, at a steady pace for a longer period of time. So instead of those short bursts of effort, you're maintaining a moderate effort level for 30 minutes an hour or whatever.
Okay, got it. So those are the main types of exercise. But the podcast seemed to really emphasize that for fat loss, the high intensity workouts like HIIT and SIT have the edge. Is that right?
Yeah, that's generally what the research shows. High-intensity exercise seems to be more effective at depleting glycogen stores.
Okay.
Glycogen is your body's primary source of fuel during intense activity. So when you deplete those stores, your body has to start tapping into fat reserves for energy.
Interesting. So you're not just burning calories doing the workout itself, but you're also kind of setting yourself up to burn more calories even after you're done.
Right. Plus, high-intensity workouts boost your metabolism, which can last for hours afterwards. So you're burning more calories even at rest.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. So it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
You're burning calories during the workout, and then you're burning more calories even after you're done.
Yep, pretty much.
I like it.
Yeah.
But I know the podcast also mentioned something about the order of exercise mattering, whether you do cardio before or after weights. Did they get into that at all?
They touched on it briefly, yeah. If fat loss is your primary goal, it might be beneficial to do your high-intensity workout first.
Okay.
And then follow it up with maybe a shorter session of moderate intensity cardio.
Okay, interesting. So why is that? Why does the order matter?
Well, if you do the high-intensity workout first, you deplete those glycogen stores.
Okay.
And then when you do the cardio afterwards, your body is more likely to use fat for fuel because the glycogen is already depleted.
Okay, so it's all about strategically timing your workouts to maximize those results.
Exactly.
I like that. But I know a lot of people swear by fasted exercise for fat burning, working out on an empty stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Does that actually make a difference? I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about that.
Yeah, it's a popular topic, that's for sure. The research on it is kind of mixed, though. Some studies show that it can increase fat oxidation, But it's not a magic bullet by any means. The overall calorie deficit is still the most important factor.
Okay. So it's not about depriving yourself, but it's about, creating that calorie deficit and just making sure you're eating less than you're burning overall.
Right. And finding an approach that you can stick with long term, because that's really the key to success with anything, right?
Yeah, for sure. Consistency is key, like we said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of things that might help, the podcast also talked about some supplements that have been studied for their potential fat-burning properties. That I mentioned caffeine and yerba mate, but they also mentioned L-carnitine and acetyl L-carnitine. Those were some new ones for me. What can you tell us about those?
Oh yeah, those are interesting ones. So basically they play a role in transporting fatty acids into the mitochondria. The mitochondria are like the powerhouses of your cells where energy is produced. So L-carnitine and acetyl L-carnitine help shuttle fat to the place where it can be burned for energy.
Okay, so they're like the delivery trucks for fat. I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it.
But could those supplements actually work? Like, are they worth adding to your routine?
The research on them is a bit mixed, to be honest. Some studies have shown some modest benefits, but others haven't really found much of an effect.
Okay, so it's not like a guaranteed thing.
Not really, and I think it's important to remember that supplements are just that. They're supplements. They're meant to supplement a healthy diet and exercise program, not replace them.
Right. Supplements shouldn't be seen as a quick fix or a magic bullet.
Definitely not. But they can be helpful for some people, especially if they're deficient in certain nutrients.
Okay, so maybe something to talk to your doctor about.
Exactly.
What about those GLP-1 agonists that they mentioned in the podcast? I don't remember hearing about those before.
Oh, yeah, those are pretty interesting. They're a class of medications that have shown some really promising results for weight loss.
Okay.
They work by mimicking a naturally occurring hormone that helps regulate blood sugar and suppress appetite. So they can be really effective for helping people lose weight and keep it off.
Wow, so they kind of like trick your body into feeling full and satisfied.
Yeah, kind of. But it's important to note that they are prescription medications.
Oh,
So you can't just, buy them over the counter. You need to talk to your doctor about them.
Right. But are there any natural ways to increase GLP-1 levels, like without taking medication?
Interestingly, the podcast mentioned that yerba mate can naturally boost GLP-1 levels.
Yerba mate, that's that South American drink, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like tea, but it has a slightly different flavor.
Okay, so that might explain why it's been linked to some health benefits.
Yeah, potentially.
But even with all these strategies for, boosting metabolism and burning fat, we can't forget about sleep, right? The podcast really emphasized how important sleep is for overall health.
Oh, absolutely. Sleep is crucial.
Yeah, they said that sleep deprivation can really sabotage our efforts.
It can. When you're sleep deprived, your body produces more cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and cortisol can actually promote fat storage. Plus, lack of sleep can mess with your hunger hormones, making you feel hungrier and crave more sugary, fatty foods.
Oh, that explains why I always want to eat everything in sight when I'm tired. So prioritizing sleep is just as important as watching what we eat and exercising.
Absolutely. It's all connected.
Right. So it's not just about, finding that one magic bullet, but it's about adopting a lifestyle that supports our goals.
Exactly. And being patient with ourselves. Because fat loss is not a linear journey.
Yeah. There will be ups and downs along the way.
But by focusing on consistency and making gradual changes, we can achieve sustainable results.
And I think that's a really important message. It's not about perfection. It's about progress.
Exactly. And finding what works for you and what you can stick with long term.
That's a great point. Okay, so we've talked about calories, metabolism, this whole nervous system thing, different types of exercise. I feel like we've covered a lot. Is there anything else we need to touch on?
Well, we briefly talked about spot reduction earlier, but I think we could dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a good one. A lot of people are probably wondering about that.
Okay, so let's save that discussion for part 3. Because it's a fascinating topic, and there's a lot to unpack.
All right. Stay tuned, everyone, because we're about to debunk some myths and maybe even reveal some surprising truths about spot reduction. Okay, so we're back, and we promised to tackle that age-old question, spot reduction. Can you really target fat loss in specific areas?
That's the holy grail, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to just choose where they lose fat?
Exactly. Like, I'd love to just get rid of this little bit here and a little bit there. But for years, we've been told it's a myth. Like you can't just do endless crunches to get rid of belly fat or
Yeah.
target like your inner thighs with some special exercises.
Right. You lose fat overall. Your body decides where it comes off. We don't get to pick and choose.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I always thought too. But the podcast, it hinted at some newer research that's kind of challenging that idea. Like maybe it's not totally impossible.
It's some cutting edge stuff. But yeah, there are some studies suggesting that targeted fat loss might be possible.
Really?
Yeah, through exercise that activates specific neurons that are connected to fat cells in certain areas.
Yeah. Okay, so instead of focusing on like a specific muscle group, we should be thinking about like how to activate the neurons in that area. Is that what you're saying?
That's kind of the theory, yeah.
But how does that even work? Like how do you activate neurons in your fat?
It's complicated. It's not like, just think about your fat and it'll disappear. But the research suggests that exercises that engage multiple muscle groups and a variety of movements might be more effective at stimulating those neurons that release fat.
Okay, so like compound exercise.
Exactly, like squats, lunges, push-ups, movements that recruit more muscle fibers and really challenge your body in multiple ways.
Got it. So instead of like doing bicep curls to target arm fat, you do like a burpee or something.
Yeah, something that incorporates the biceps, triceps, shoulders, core, all of it. It just seems like a more global approach to fat loss might be more effective than trying to really isolate things.
Folks, so compound exercise is probably the way to go.
It seems that way, yeah. And it makes sense if you think about it. Instead of just working one tiny muscle, you're engaging more of your body, which means you're burning more calories overall and potentially mobilizing more fat.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's amazing how much we're still learning about all of this. Like, even if spot reduction isn't totally a thing, it's cool to think that we might have more control over where we lose fat than we thought.
Yeah, and it really highlights how interconnected everything is in the body. It's not just about calories in and calories out. It's the nervous system, hormones, muscle activity, all of it working together.
Like a big puzzle.
Totally. And we're just starting to put the pieces together.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of putting some of those pieces together today. We've talked about calories, metabolism, hormones, sleep, stress, exercise, even the possibility of spot reduction. I feel like we've really covered it all.
We've definitely covered a lot of ground, from the science to the practical tips. And hopefully our listener who requested this deep dive has gotten a lot out of it.
Yeah. So to our listener, thank you for the great topic suggestion. And to everyone listening, keep those questions coming. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something new and exciting. Until then, keep learning and keep experimenting to find what works best for you.
And remember, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Fat loss is a personal journey, so be patient with yourself and enjoy the process.